Vayakhel Pekudei. Vayakhel is to assemble, and Pekudei is to give an account. So in this Torah portion, we're getting ready to close out this book and getting ready to enter into the next, right? Where we're closing out the book of Shemot, closing out the book of Exodus, and we're getting ready to learn about protocol and holiness next week, right? Because we're getting into the new book. So what we're learning here is Vayakhel Pekudei, to assemble and to give an account. We know that there is a day coming when all the great and small will assemble before the Lord our God, and we will all have to give an account of where we've lived our life. Amen? And so this is kind of representing what is happening. Moshe was given instructions for the tabernacle, and when he was given the instruction, he had to relay that, and then they all had to bring all these pieces and parts back to Moshe, and then they had to say, is this proper? Is this the way it's supposed to be designed? And Moshe had to give an account of everything that was done, that it was done in order, and that it was done, that it fit together in the way that it was supposed to. Okay? So now, Vayakhel Pekudei, the first thing before he had to give an account of all these things was the assembling part. Kind of ironic, isn't it? That we're currently, I mean, at the time we're going through this right now, we've got all the stuff with the COVID-19 and everything, right? And everyone's like, social distancing, stay away from everybody and keep away and do all these, and limiting the gatherings and everything, which I understand precaution, guys. I'm not really saying anything about precaution, but, we shouldn't also generate that fear that's there, To take precautions is not fear, but we shouldn't be afraid for anything. Anyway, not getting into all that. But the point of it being, there's always something to try to keep you from gathering. There's always something to try to keep you away from coming in with the assembly. Vayakhel, and he gathered. Well, this was the part of what was happening. All the people had to gather together to give all the pieces and the parts of the tabernacle so that an account could be given and so that an account could be made about it. All right? And so this gathering is crucial to our faith. Because what are we told through the scriptures? We're told that we're supposed to gather to learn. We're supposed to gather to teach. We're supposed to gather to encourage one another. We're supposed to gather to help each other. We're supposed to do all these things in gatherings. Well, the hard part is when we're not gathered, we're not connecting. It's kind of funny because we have all these things today with social media and the smartphones and all these other things, but we're still disconnected. It's like, well, we're all these great things so that we can be connected. We're not connected. We're still disconnected. And that's something that we should try to work above, to try to be better than that. But this is also why we're told in the scripture, at least once a week, there was a gathering of the people together. And so when we're gathering together, it's to help us be reminded of who the God that we serve is and who our brothers are. Because we can lose sight of that just with the busyness of life. Okay? So this gathering, one of the things with the adversary, one of the biggest devices of the adversary is to remove you from the camp. And if he can remove you from the camp, it's one thing if someone was put outside the camp because they were unclean or something like that, but if someone was to remove themselves from the camp, that means, like they walked away, they left. Well, where's their sustenance there? Where's the supply? Where's the helping to meet what they need spiritually? Helps and learning to focus on what's at the center of the camp. Well, the tabernacle. And it's important to have that at the center of the camp, because if it's not at the center of the camp, then really everything else we're doing is in vain anyway. So we've got to keep our focus toward His presence in our midst always. But sometimes we get busy with life, and we get busy with the things that are there, and we need to come back to refocus. And that's what Shabbat is for. Interesting that when we get into this portion, and we're talking about building the tabernacle, building the Mishkan, he talks about Shabbat again. Interesting that before the sin of the golden calf and right after the sin of the golden calf, you hear about the importance of Shabbat. Why? Because it's designed that way. Because it's designed to keep us together so we focus on what we're supposed to be focused on so that we don't forget. Because if we're not constantly being reminded of what's important, we'll make something else more important, i.e. golden calf. Okay? So, you ready to get into it? Vayakhel is where we're at. Vayakhel. So what is the purpose of our gathering together? And that's the key thing. Exodus 35:1 reads, "And Moshe gathered together all the congregation of the sons of Israel, and he said to them, these are the words which Yahweh has commanded that you should do them." First off, these things, they're not suggestions. And what did he command? Well, we'll get back into that in a minute, okay? Because we know that he already said he wanted to build a tabernacle in their midst so that he could dwell with them, among them, within them, right? But he said, before you even start construction on this, I don't want you to lose sight of what's important. What was important? I thought building the tabernacle was important. Well, it was. But if they're building the tabernacle and violating Shabbat, then they're missing the purpose for having the tabernacle there. See? So we'll get into that in a minute. So the purpose of their gathering together, and this is Vayakhel is the word that's used here. Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Israel. So Vayakhel is to gather, to assemble. What was the purpose of this gathering together? To remind the people of what Yahweh has commanded for them, of what Yah has established for them, of his heart and his will and his intention for the people, right? Remind them of covenant, to remind them of his desires and how to walk in his ways. Exodus 32:1. Let's compare and contrast this. "And the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, and the people gathered themselves together to Aaron." So we find that Moshe gathered all the people together to draw attention to the Father, right? Well, the people gathered themselves together and came to Aaron to what end? Golden calf. See, what was the purpose of their gathering? Because here, it's the same word that's used there, Vayakhel ha'am al Aharon. So the same word is used here, Vayakhel, to assemble and to gather. But what was the purpose and what was the intent? Can you gather for something that is not what the Father wants? So it's not just unity we're looking for, is it? So you can be united for the wrong thing. Think Tower of Babel. So it's our unity that needs to be focused towards the Father. It needs to be focused towards his desire and what he wants for us. Because when we gather together, we're going to have to give an account, much like it was here. You gather them together to say, these are the things that Yahweh desires for you, and then they had to bring all these pieces back together. And even then, all the pieces had to be assembled and brought back together. I kind of like the idea of the tabernacle all being brought together and assembled. It reminds me of the dry bones. You know, all being brought in together and all the pieces and parts being assembled and fitting together perfectly to be established as one in their midst. It's a beautiful picture. So what is the purpose of our gathering together? In Exodus 32, it was, make us Elohim. And that's the word they used. They said, make us Elohim. Make us Elohim that will go before us. As for Moses, this man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what's become of him. Well, in Exodus 35, it says, these are the words which Yahweh has commanded that you should do them. It's kind of a big difference between the two, isn't it? And that's the point. When we gather, it should be gathering around the heart of the Father, which is what Moshe was telling us. We shouldn't be gathering around saying, well, we don't quite know where this is going, or we don't quite know what this is looking like, or there's a lot of uncertainty here. We better make something that we know and are familiar with. Let's make a golden calf. See, don't go down that road, right? It's easy for us to do, isn't it? It's easy to fall into those mindsets, but that's what the Father's calling us above. So is our purpose to follow our own instincts, our own ways, our own agendas, in creating ways to prove ourselves right? Or is it to gather to develop a heart of obedience to the God of Scripture so that we become the royal priesthood and the holy nation that he desires for us to become? See? Big difference. Acts 15, 19 to 21. Yeshua's Talmidim, when they were saying, when we're gathering together, to what purpose, to what end, and what should we be doing? How should we be living our life? How should we be conducting our affairs? And remember, this was written in accordance with the Gentiles coming into faith. Okay, this was not just something that was written, this was just for the Jewish people, right? No, this was in regards to there are Gentiles who don't know anything about the Messiah, don't know anything about the God of Israel, don't know anything about the covenant, don't know anything about anything, but they have come to the realization that they know that he is God. And they want to serve him. The problem is they don't know how. And so they're coming in and creating havoc all over the place. So what are we to do? Well, the ruling was, let's start by giving them just these 4 things, and then there was a 5th to kind of get them going forward. right? So what were the 4 things? It's funny because it was things like regarding idolatry, rules of kosher, things like that. But the 5th one often gets overlooked. What are they? Acts 15, 19 to 21. To abstain from the things polluted by idols, and from sexual immorality, from what has been strangled, and from blood. What's the 5th one? For from ancient generations Moses has had in every city those who proclaim him, for he has read every Shabbat in the synagogues. So what he's saying is that Moses is read in every Shabbat in the synagogue. So is that just a statement, or are they saying, go to the synagogues on Shabbat to hear the Torah taught? And that's what it is. Because they're going to the synagogues to hear the Torah proclaimed so that they could learn. So these 4 things was a starting point in their faith. Interesting, because even today, how many people really understand some of these things? Things like abstain from things polluted by idols. Well, talk to idolatry to people today. They really don't have a concept. But then, well, I don't bow down to an idol. Okay, but it doesn't have to be that. Or sexual immorality. Wow, have you looked at the world? Which was also involved in idolatry, right? Because how did they worship the idols? Well, that was part of it, right? Things that have been strangled. That has to do with kosher. And abstaining from the blood, that has to do with kosher. So again, because we aren't taught the things of clean, unclean, holy, common, and what the Father is telling us, we don't even get this basic concept of these 4 things that the disciples thought were important in the first century church. But this was the starting point for them. Then go to the synagogue on Shabbat to hear the Torah taught every week. So that way it's a step-by-step process. You start here and then you live your life as you go. And that's what Shabbat is for. It's a reconnect. And that's why the Father's given it to us like that. So that we can reconnect, not just with Him, but with His people as well. Creating community and building legacy is a point. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs puts it this way. All your children shall be learned of the Lord, and great will be the peace of your children. That's Isaiah 54:13. And he says you should read not your children, but your builders. Because in some translations, the words for children can also be translated as builders. So he says you should read it not as your children, but your builders. So it would read, your builders will be learned of the Lord, and great will be the peace of your builders. Because what are we supposed to do with our children? Teach them. Teach them to do what? To restore. To bring reconciliation. To build the kingdom here. So our children are builders. Are we equipping them and giving them the tools they need to do the job? Right? When scholars become builders, they create peace. If you seek to create a community out of strongly individualistic people, you have to turn them into builders. And this is what Moshe did in Parsha Vayakhel. Strongly individualistic people remain individualistic people unless they can find something to get on board with. And that's what happens here. Moshe gets them a common goal. Let's get this tabernacle done, guys. Let's build this so that the Father can dwell in our midst. Much like here, we need to learn to establish His kingdom here, and we need to learn to dwell and restoratively and to bring peace here. We need to build that because the world is constantly trying to tear it down. Okay, so we need to be builders of peace. What we learn is that the natural teaches us about the spiritual. What did Paul say? What comes first, the natural or the spirit? Well, here's an example. You are born, and then you are born again. Right? So what comes first, the natural or the spiritual? The natural. First there was Adam, and then there was the second Adam, Yeshua, right? The last Adam, right? So now we have this. So what comes first? The natural. Well, we learn in the natural sometimes what the Father is trying to teach us in the Spirit. Because sometimes we need to see something to get it, And sometimes it's not just, okay, we can hear something and we might not grasp the concept. But if you show us, now we got it. And guys, that's one of the reasons why Yeshua came, to show us, right? So what is it, some of the things He was trying to show us? Well, how about this? Build a sanctuary. Okay, but we say, but we are the sanctuary. Okay, but how can you say we are the sanctuary if we don't know how the first one was built? We first have to learn what the sanctuary is, how it worked, how it functioned, what it represented, then we can see, do I line up with that? And if I line up with that, then I am preparing a sanctuary for him to dwell. Okay? Otherwise, we can say something and have it completely abstract. What happens when we make something abstract? Well, abstract, we make it completely subjective, and then we can kind of twist things to see what we can get away with. But when something is concrete, it's different, right? And sometimes to build something will cost you something, will it not? Build a house, see how much it costs. Ain't cheap, especially if you use good stuff, especially if you have good help, right? So anything that you build will cost something. Are we prepared to make the sacrifices to build the kingdom here? That's tough, but that's what we're supposed to do, right? It will cost us. Exodus 35:2. Now we're in verse 2. So verse 1, he says, this is what Yahweh has commanded you. What has he commanded you? Now we're talking about getting ready to build the tabernacle, right? So what's important? 6 days, work will be done. You see that? This is what God has commanded you. 6 days, work will be done. On the seventh day, you shall have a Shabbat of solemn rest, holy to Yahweh. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire in your dwelling places on the Sabbath day. So he says, even in the building of the tabernacle, a place for him to dwell, work on it 6 days. The seventh, you are not to work on it. And guys, if you were given the task to build the tabernacle and you really wanted it here, wouldn't you be like, we're working 3 shifts every day. We're working every day, sun up to sundown until this is done. We want to get it here as fast as we can, right? But Yahweh said, work the 6 days. Don't work on the seventh. Because can we say that we're working the seventh day to build a place for him to dwell if we're profaning it while building it? Make sense? So Shabbat. For Yah, Shabbat was the last day of creation. He created on the 6 days, and it says in the seventh day, he stopped creating. Okay? It's not just like he rested. He was so tired, he was so exhausted, he just couldn't possibly do anything else. No, he said, the Shabbat is to cease, to stop. So he stopped creating. Okay? And think about this. What day was Adam created? 6th day, right? So his first full day was Shabbat. His first sundown that he experienced was going into Shabbat. His first sunrise he experienced was on Shabbat. Wow, isn't that amazing? What a picture. I created you, I fashioned you, I formed you, and I want you to rest with me. And the first thing that Yahweh blessed was Shabbat. Genesis 2:3, so Yah blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he ceased from his work that he had done in creation. So before the people could even start to prepare a place for Yahweh to dwell, what do they have to do? They have to prepare themselves. Before we could say we're going to build a place for him, we have to make sure that we're in the right frame of mind to do it. We have to make sure we understand the task. We don't have to know all the ins and outs of it, but I gotta do my part, right? What if my part is to carry the wood? I carry the wood, he measures it, he cuts it, all that, right? What if my part is to carry the wood, but I don't want to carry the wood, I want to do something else? Is it going to go as smoothly as it should? No. So before we can really build a place for him to dwell, we first have to make sure that we are prepared to do that. Which means, are we willing to do what's being asked of us, or do we want to do someone else's job? Who are we building the tabernacle for? For him or for us? Are we building his house or ours? Are we preparing a place for him to dwell, or are we trying to occupy a space where we can put him in a box to make him our idol? Big difference, right? So they stopped the physical work in the building to focus on the spiritual rejuvenation that is Shabbat. To cease the physical work and to enter into Shabbat is part of building his house. It's part of building his kingdom, and part of building his people. Haggai 1, 7 through 10. Thus says Yahweh Sabaoth, consider your ways. Go up to the hills and bring the wood and build the house that I may take pleasure in it, that I may be glorified, says Yahweh. You looked for much, and behold, it came to little, and when you brought it home, I blew it away. Why, declares Yahweh Sabaoth? Because of my house that lies in ruins, while each of you busies himself with his own house. Therefore, the heavens above you have withheld the dew, and the earth has withheld its produce. What he's saying is that the house of Yah lay in ruins, and the people were in no hurry to restore it. His house was laying in pieces, tore up. And the people were more concerned about rebuilding their own homes than building a place for Yah to dwell in their midst. What would you rather have? You know? I think first things first, right? What's the most important thing? Make sure that we are preparing a place as a holy people. Make sure we are prepared to be with Him. Prepared with what He desires. Prepared for His ways. Talk about being prepared. Talk about the 10 virgins. 5 wise, 5 foolish, right? Notice, all virgins, all waiting for the bridegroom. At some point, they all had oil and fire in their lamps. Because when the time came and it says the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him, it says they got up and they trimmed, and then the 5 had extra oil. And then the other 5 said, not just we have no oil, it said our lamps are going out and we don't have any more oil. So at some point they had fire, they had oil, they had it, they lost it. They weren't prepared. And so what the Father is telling us, if we truly desire Him within us, we have to prepare to be a place where He can dwell. And I'm not just talking about the tabernacle, I'm not just talking about the temple. I'm talking about, is your heart really surrendered to Him? Are you really giving yourself to Him and preparing that place for Him to dwell? Or do we have idols in the sanctuary? We'll get rid of them so that we can make that place clean and a good place for Him to be. Shabbat belongs to a category of mitzvot called edut. Edut is the word for testimony. Now think about this. When we keep Shabbat, we're giving a testimony, aren't we? What are we testifying to? That He is our God. That He is the one that we serve. When Yahweh says that the Shabbat is a sign for you, the word sign is the same thing that we would use for a wedding ring. It's a sign that you do not belong to you. It's a sign that you belong to somebody else. So when we say, no, we are honoring Shabbat, we are keeping Shabbat, we are testifying to the fact that Yahweh is our God, we serve Him, we serve nobody else, including ourselves. Exodus 31:13. You are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Shabbat. This is a what? Sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, Yahweh, sanctifies you. Why did He say this is a sign for you? So that we will know that He sanctifies us. We are not trying to keep Shabbat so that we can be sanctified. No, we are keeping Shabbat as a reminder that it is Him that does sanctify us. He is the one that redeemed us. He is the one that sets us apart. And so when we keep Shabbat, we are resting in Him, and He is setting us apart. And it kind of is from the world, isn't it? Think about all the world activities that go on Shabbat. You know, even activities that only happen one day a week. What day is it? Shabbat. You know, and oftentimes, you know, we're in a position where, you know, our kids, do we get them involved in worldly activities or do we get involved in Shabbat? We have those choices to make. Which one is it? You know, the Shabbat is a sign that you don't belong to you. And there's no faster way to set you apart, isn't there? Verse 14, you shall keep Shabbat because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days' work will be done, but the 7th day is a Shabbat of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath will be put to death. Keep in mind, guys, the Shabbat is not just the time of, okay, I better stay in bed and do nothing. That's not what it is. Again, to rest is not just to cease work. Okay? To rest, it means to rest in Him, to seek Him, to be rejuvenated spiritually. Okay? Plus, to keep in mind, read through Leviticus 23 where it says, well, Shabbat is a holy convocation. That's a public assembly. That's a called out gathering. You know, that's a public thing. Well, Israel didn't do it. I beg to differ. They lived it. You know, every day of the week for 40 years, they were centered around the tabernacle. So that's why you didn't see the distinction made when they were in the wilderness. That's why they stayed in their tents, because they were there. Us? No, we're all over the place. That's why Scripture says, don't forsake assembling yourselves together, even now. You know? Verse 16. Therefore, the people of Israel shall keep Shabbat, observing the Shabbat throughout their generations as a covenant forever. And we see these kind of things like Romans 11, Ephesians 2, Galatians 3. Who is the people of Israel? Whether you're natural born, grafted in, whatever the point is, you are part of a people called Israel. So who's the Shabbat for? You can't say, well, the Shabbat's for the Jews, but the Gentiles. No, because if you are his, you're no longer Jew or Gentile. You are part of a people set apart as Israel. 17. It is a sign forever between me and the people of Israel that in 6 days Yahweh made the heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he was rested and refreshed. Here's the point. I'm not going to use a lot of scripture on it, but you can look it up. Where was Yeshua on Shabbat? In the synagogue. You know, we say, well, no, see, the first century church, well, they met in the homes. Yes, they did. They met in the homes. You know where else they met? In the temple. You know where else they met? In the synagogue. Not one of these was given to replace the other. They each had their different functions, different purpose. Okay? So Luke 4:16. So when he went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up on Shabbat, he went to the synagogue, and what's it say? As usual. So he went to Nazareth, and then as usual, and some translations say as his custom was. Well, what does custom mean? It means this is just what he did. So where was he on Shabbat? In the synagogue. Luke 13:10. So Yeshua was teaching in one of the synagogues on Shabbat. Where was he? In the synagogue on Shabbat. Shabbat is a time for good. Okay, you say, well, what is good, right? Shabbat is a time for rest. It's a time for healing. It's a time for restoration. And it's a time to connect. And that's our purpose of gathering. To help each other out. Sometimes that rest is giving each other a little bit of encouragement when we see each other. And sometimes, and you say, well, I don't really feel like I need, well, no, you don't know. Maybe you're the missing link there. You know, maybe you being there is what somebody else needs that day. Can I share something with you? It's not all about you. It's about him. And when he's called us together like that, when we're all gathered in together with all of our different personalities and everything and all of our different gifts, it's a good thing. And we're all coming in for one purpose, right? Isaiah 58, 13 and 14 says, if you hold back your foot on Shabbat from pursuing your own interests on my holy day, if you call Shabbat a delight, Adonai's holy day, does it say it's the Jews' holy day? No, it's Yahweh's holy day. It's Adonai's holy day. If you call Shabbat a delight, Adonai's holy day, worth honoring, then honor it by what? Not doing your usual things or pursuing your interests or speaking about them. And if you do, you will find delight in Adonai, and I will make you ride on the heights of the land and feed you with the heritage of your ancestor Yaakov, for the mouth of Adonai has spoken. Isaiah 56 says, here's what Adonai says, observe justice, do what is right, for my salvation is close to coming, my righteousness to being revealed. Happy is the person who does this, anyone who grasps it firmly. Who does what? Happy is the person that does what? What's it say? Who keeps Shabbat and not profane it, and keeps himself from doing any evil. A foreigner joining Adonai should not say, Adonai will separate me from his people. Likewise, the eunuch should not say, I'm a dried up tree. For here's what Adonai says, as for the eunuchs who keep my Shabbats, who choose what pleases me and holds fast to my covenant. Verse 5, in my house, within my walls, I will give them power and a name greater than the sons and daughters, and I will give them an everlasting name that will not be cut off. And the foreigners who join themselves to Adonai to serve him, to love the name of Adonai, and to be his workers. all who keep Shabbat and do not profane it and hold fast to my covenant. I will bring them to my holy mountain, make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all people. So we've heard that part. My house shall be called a house of prayer for all people, right? But how many of you knew that that was in the context of keeping Shabbat and coming in and bringing your offerings? See, context, right? Jeremiah 17:21 says, tell them that if they love their lives, they must not carry a burden on Shabbat, not carry a load on Shabbat. I believe this could be physically and spiritually and mentally and emotionally and all that. Shabbat's supposed to be a delight. I understand sometimes our state of mind doesn't always allow for that. Thank God he is gracious and merciful, right? But the intent is Shabbat should be a joy. We shouldn't carry a burden on Shabbat. We shouldn't have to, be overloaded with work and physical labor, nor should we have to carry, the emotional burden either. We have to learn to rest in him, They must not carry anything through the gates of Jerusalem or carry anything out of their houses on the Shabbat. They must not work on the Shabbat, and they must observe it as a sacred day as commanded to their ancestors. Their ancestors did not listen to me or pay any attention. Instead, they became stubborn. They would not obey me or learn from me. Tell these people that they must obey my commands, that they must not carry a load through the gates of the city on Shabbat, that they must observe Shabbat as a sacred day, must not do work on it. Wasn't that the message of all the prophets? Repent, return to the Lord your God, and keep his word. Well, that's what he was telling Jeremiah here. The people were not honoring Yah by keeping covenant and showing that covenant. So he was calling the people back to that. So after all of this, after we're giving the importance for the Shabbat, after we say you work the 6 days, don't work the 7th, now they can go through with the plans for the Mishkan and to start getting the pieces together. Okay? So what does that look like? What does this have to do? Well, what's the important thing in order to get the Mishkan going? The offerings. Because they had to bring the gold, the silver, the precious stones, the wood, the linen, the fabric, all this stuff had to be brought, right? Where'd that come from? The people had to bring it. So the people had to give of their time, their talent, and their resources. And we read about the plan for the Mishkan, Terumah, right? And the half shekel, where was the half shekel collected from? All the men from 20 and up, as given as an atonement. The silver that was given for that was used for the hooks and the sockets to help hold the tabernacle together. Interesting that the things that you're giving and holding is to help hold the tabernacle together. The golden calf was collected from your personal possessions. Think about that. The golden calf, Aaron didn't just take, all this stuff was given for the tabernacle, and now we're going to take the stuff that was given for the tabernacle to make the golden calf. No, all the stuff, the golden calf was made from the people's personal possessions. They gave to have the golden calf made. The question is, what are we giving to? Are we giving to help build the kingdom? Are we giving to help build a place for him to dwell? Are we giving to help build what he desires? Or are we giving to build a golden calf? Again, so they have to learn. So Moshe put the need before the people. He said, these are the things that we need. And then it says, they came. So Moshe put the need before the people, and then all the people dispersed. They went back to their homes, tents, and then they came. So you say, well, who gave for the tabernacle? Well, everybody did. Not really. Everyone could have had a role and a part in it, but who were the ones that gave? Exodus 35:20. So then the whole community of the people of Israel withdrew from Moshe's presence. Who? The whole community of people of Israel. So this was Israel. He was addressing all Israel that went. And then they came. Who was they? Those whose heart stirred him and everyone whose spirit made him willing. Notice that wasn't the whole community. Isn't it the way it is? It was there are people who saw the importance and the need and the desire to have this established in their midst, and there's those who didn't. Fortunately, the ones who saw the need for it was for the benefit of the entire nation. Even if the people who didn't see the benefit of it still benefited from it because Yahweh was there. But just to bring the point out. So they brought Adonai's offering of the work of the tent of meeting and the service in it and the holy garments. Both men and women came, as many as had willing hearts, and they brought the nose rings, the earrings, the signet rings, the belts, all kinds of gold jewelry, and everyone bringing an offering of gold to Adonai. 1 Chronicles 29, 9 and 10. The people were filled with joy because they had given willingly, wholeheartedly. They had given willingly to Adonai, and David the king too was completely filled with joy as he blessed Adonai before the entire community. Blessed be you, Adonai, the God of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. If we're pleasing him, then it's joyful to us, isn't it? 3 John 1, 5 through 8. Dear friend, you're being faithful to God when you care for the traveling teachers who pass through, even though they're strangers to you. They have told the church here of your loving friendship. Please continue providing for such teachers in a manner that pleases God. For they are traveling for the Lord, and they accept nothing from the people who are not believers. So we ourselves should support them so that we can be their partners as they teach the truth. 2 Corinthians 9, 5. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to go on ahead of you to arrange in advance for the gift you have promised, so that it may be ready as a willing gift, not as an exaction. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as what? As he has decided in his heart. It's up to you what you're going to do with that. You know? Each one is to give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. As God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times you may abound in every good work. As it is written, he has distributed freely, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest for your righteousness. Notice work. You see that? So he will give you the means to keep doing the work. He doesn't just give you what you say you need. He gives you the means to work to get what you need. Think about this. When they plant the field and they harvest the field, they leave the corners. Why? So that those who don't have can go get it. But they still have to go get it. When God gave manna in the wilderness, did he drop an omer for each person at the door of their tent? No. They each had to go out and collect what they needed and then prepare it. But it was there. Okay? So sometimes Yah will give us what we need, but he'll give us what we need by the means of working to get it. And that's in many different ways. And yeah, I believe that's spiritually and physically as well. You know, here's a great example. He gave us his word. If you don't read it, you're not going to get anything out of it. You have to do the work. You have to read it. You know? If you feel it's important to learn some Hebrew to have a better understanding of the word, then you need to learn Hebrew. You know? You can't just look at it and say, well, maybe someday. No, if you really want to get that understanding, you have to do it. See, so Yahweh has given us the means and the capability to do it. Now, some are faster than others, but we all need to do the work. And that's what he's telling us. We're all part of the community. We all need to learn to work together to build what he's desiring in our midst and in our hearts, right? So, verse 11, so you'll be enriched in every way, to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. For the ministry of the service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. When you give to the kingdom, you not only get a blessing back, but you're blessing others, and some people you may never know. You know? Because like I said, it's not always about you. And who knows how far-reaching one act goes? Just one act of kindness, who knows how far that can go? Who knows how what we do today can impact someone down the road, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, years from now? You don't know. So what do we need to do? We need to build his kingdom, we need to be builders, and we need to bring restoration. Part of building is restoration. Right? You see something that needs repair, needs broken, do you just tear it down and start over? No, you assess it to see if you can restore it. If it can't be restored, then you knock it down and build over. But you always look to try to restore first, right? That's what the Father's asking us to do. When we're praying, his kingdom come, okay, is it just something we say, something we pray, or are we working it? Are we doing it? We have something to do, guys, and we need to make sure we're out there doing it to show his kingdom here, right? Exodus 36, 1 and 2. So Moshe summoned Bezalel and Oholiab. Bezalel is in the shadow of God. Interesting. Bezalel is in the shadow of God. And Oholiab is in the tent of his father. So Bezalel was the foreman for building the tabernacle, and Aholiab was the one to help him. In the shadow of God and in the tent of his father. What amazing pictures, right? So where do you dwell in the shadow of God? To dwell in his holy place, right? Even in my mind is even alluding forward to Psalm 91. He who dwells under the shadow of the Almighty. Word shadow, Bezalel, in the shadow of God. So in my mind, to dwell in the shadow of the Almighty is a picture of dwelling in his tent. So he summoned them and every craftsman to whom Adonai had given wisdom. Not just wisdom, but check it out. He has filled him with the Spirit of God, with skill and intelligence, with knowledge and craftsmanship, and has inspired him and filled him with skill to do every sort of work. We have wisdom, knowledge, and understanding all working together with the people who are building the tabernacle, all marks of a person in whom the Spirit of God fills. Filled with his Spirit, they accomplished his work. Hosea 14:9, whoever is wise, let him understand these things. Whoever is discerning, let him know them. For the ways of Yahweh are right, and the upright do what? Walk in them, but transgressors stumble in them. He doesn't say that his ways change for each individual. He says the upright walk in his ways, but transgressors stumble in his ways. So what's the answer? Learn to walk in his ways. And again, that goes back to building. It's a step-by-step process, right? So in everyone whose heart stirred him came to take part in the work. So what we find here is that the whole community come together in unity to see the completed work of the tabernacle. Even though they may not have all had equal contribution, but they all saw the work finished. And I guarantee once it was done, they saw the relevance of it being in their midst, right? Exodus 40:30. And he set the laver between the tent of the congregation and the altar, and he put the water there to wash withal. And Moses and Aaron and his sons washed their hands and their feet. And when they went to the tent of the congregation, and when they came near the altar, they washed as the Lord commanded Moses. And he reared up the court round about the tabernacle and the altar, and he set up the hanging of the court gate. So Moses finished the work. Don't you love that? So Moses finished the work. Who finished the work? Talk about having a right attitude, a good attitude, right? And that's the thing. All these people standing there who did all the work, and it says, and Moses finished the work. Did they really care who got the credit for it as long as it was done? Moses had to oversee it, didn't he? It was all brought to him, and he had to give an account for it. Is this what was seen? Yes, it was. Now let's assemble it. So yeah, Moses did complete the work. He did oversee it. But what was the last thing put in place that made the work complete? The courtyard. Because it goes through and see the mikveh, and then they set up the courtyard, then it was finished. So why does the courtyard complete the work? Why did the courtyard complete the tabernacle? Before the courtyard was placed, the Mishkan was completely open. It was approachable from all sides, and it was exposed. There needed to be boundaries that were set between holy and common. There has to be boundaries for order. Because if you encroach a holy space and you were unclean, what would happen to you? So if there were no boundaries around the courtyard to show you where that line for the holy space was, and you were just out walking, and you crossed the line, that's not metaphorically. Because the Levites were there to guard the sanctity of the holy things. If you encroached something on the holy space, you were met with force. So, there has to be boundaries. And setting up the courtyard is to ensure there is only one way in. There's only one door. You can only go in this way into the tabernacle. And you had to follow the right order. And you had to go the right way. You couldn't just say, I want to go into the most holy place and just charge in. Nor could you dig under. Or a paratrooper. You had to follow protocol. And you had to go in this way. So think about this. What finished the work was the boundaries that were establishing it, to separate it, to make it holy. Because is something really holy unless you know what is normal, common, right? Now put it in this context. The 6 days of the week, they're the normal, they're working. The holy, the seventh, was set aside and established as holy. That's called boundaries, people. The Father established boundaries for the Shabbat. He established boundaries for the tabernacle. He established boundaries for his kingdom. And all of these was to show that there's a better way, and a way that he desires for us to live. So let's be found doing it. Amen? All right. The sanctity of the Mishkan was guarded and protected by Moshe. Numbers 3:38. But those who encamp before the tabernacle toward the east, even before the tabernacle of the congregation eastward, shall be Moshe, Aaron, his sons, keeping the charge of the sanctuary for the charge of the children of Israel, and the stranger that comes nigh shall be reprimanded very lightly. No. What's it say? Slapped on the wrist? No. What's it say? Put to death. John 5:46 and 47. For had you believed Moses, you would have believed me, for he wrote of me. But if you believe not his writings, how you will believe my words? There has to be boundaries to the holy things. If there are no boundaries to the holy things, then listen, nothing is holy. And to call something that is holy common or even profane, we're in dangerous territory there. We have to be mindful of the holy things. Because just because we're in a different generation and there's no tabernacle in our midst does not mean holy stops being holy. See, so we need to be mindful of what is holy. Because if we say, well, we're supposed to be a holy people, but if we have no idea what that means, how can we say that we are? You don't even have, if we have no idea what we're saying, so we have to learn what's holy. We have to learn what happens when we do not regard holy as holy, right? Exodus 40:33. So again, he erected the courtyard around the tabernacle and the altar. He set up the screen for the entrance of the courtyard, and the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of Adonai filled the tabernacle. This was the goal. This was the heart. This was the plan, to have Yahweh in our midst, but yet he was there, and what we find, this book ends on a cliffhanger, because it says, but they couldn't go in because the glory was there. But if the glory was there, and that was the point, and to have communion with him and to have relationship with him, but we can't go in, what happens? We pick it up in Leviticus. Because the Vayikra is all about drawing near to the presence of a holy God, and what is holy, and what is your role in that? See? So Leviticus tells us, as a holy people, how then should we live? How do we talk about the holiness of God? How do we be a people set apart? And how can we come into his presence? Because he says we can. So how do we do that? He made a way. Amen? We'll learn about that coming up soon. Let's all stand.